resources and the opportunities they afford to create the platform for wealth for us as a country.
How do we begin to do that?
There are many avenues for doing that, one of which is the opportunity to talk around it. So the platform to promote those ideas through the World Economic Forum that just finished in Davos, and the African edition, which is coming up in May in Nigeria. There must be continuous engagement of thoughts between the private sector and the public sector, appreciating what the pains and the drivers are across both divides. And I think the opportunity we are having this morning to talk about that is one of those that will help us reinforce that. This is without taking away the opportunity of discussions that take place at the various National Assembly fora and many other places of such, where there's a cross-fertilization of ideas. I'm from the private sector, so for us, we continue to push those key things that remain topical for us in creating an inclusive development platform for our economy. And we'll be speaking a bit to that as we go on in the course of this session. If you want to get more specific.
How have they been able to grow economically without the kind of foreign investment which we expect?
Well, the Nigerian economy has been growing as at Q3 last 2013. It grew at 6.8%. There's been
these all figures we see on paper. In reality, the common man on the street will say, I didn't see any growth in the economy. My sons, my children who have master's degrees and PhDs are still sitting at home. So what are you talking to me about 6.8% growth in the economy?
Well, to be said, some of those growth, like you said, are actually in numbers, and they've not been able to really affect the life of the average man in terms of what it takes from, in terms of improvement in standard of living. But the truth is, there are a couple of reforms that government has initiated, coming from the beginning of the democratic dispensation in 1999. So, it's a long journey. So, I think, it's a long journey really. So, I will expect these benefits.
We should be patient.
Patient. So, even patience and the fact that even the elite in Davos were kind of like shocked at the growing inequality. And the picture painted is that about 85% of the world's richest people, their wealth alone is equivalent to what is owned by the bottom of the 7 billion people on Earth. How would that, talking about inclusive growth, compare that with this. How do we move forward?
Well, I think that focus, that emphasis on inclusiveness, comes out of these, the figures that we talked about. So that, for example, in the last six or so of the 10 fastest growing economies in the world in the last 5 to 10 years are from Africa. Nigeria is one of them. As you said, we've been growing in excess of 5-6% in the last, 5-10 years. But the question then is, people are out there, people are asking, when do we begin to see this change in our life? When do we begin to feel this? The latest unemployment figures that have come out say put youth unemployment at 54%. That's the Office of Statistics came out last year. 54%, that's massive. So I think that's the whole focus then of the theme of the World Economic Forum, forging inclusive. So that inclusiveness is, how do we make this expansion, this development, how do we make it filter down to the lives of the ordinary person,
the majority of Nigerians.
And I think that this is the best time to start that conversation. We cannot continue to quote figures and statistics. We talk about FDI, that's foreign investment coming in, $8, $9, $10 billion per annum. We talk about all of that, but people need to see changes in their lives. People need to see jobs. People need to see, minimum wage go up. People need to see, we're talking about 10.5 million school kids of school age who are not in school. They have to be getting into school. So obviously there's a disconnect, there's a gap. And I think that the conversation should be a national one. It's not just for government, it's about government, the private sector, it's about all coming together to ask, how are we managing to expand our economy without touching the lives of the people that I call the bottom millions, the people at the bottom of the food chain.
He spoke about foreign investment. How much can we grow on our own without foreign investment? Because there doesn't seem to be much foreign investment coming in for obvious reasons.
Okay, the depth of our reserves and of our banking sector is not enough to sustain the scale of development that we need to have to take us to where we're going. Let me first start by saying we have actually been having increased foreign investment in Nigeria. In the past 3 years, the level of FDI into Nigeria has grown to about $20 billion. And that's massive compared to what we have had prior to then. The major problem we are having in Nigeria revolves around a number of key centers, one of which is we are an infrastructure deficit country. Infrastructure is extremely key to unlocking the economy that we have today. And that infrastructure deficit cuts across the key sectors that should drive and fuel our growth. So if we take, for example, the electricity sector today, that infrastructure deficit means even when you are able to generate electricity, you are not able to evacuate it to all the various places that need it. And the investment that is needed for that is one that must happen on such a scale and level that allows everybody to be able to feel the multiplier effect of having electricity. You look at the fuel segment of our economy today, we're suffering the same level of infrastructure deficits. We're struggling with being able to evacuate products from one part of the country to the other. The infrastructure has broken down. One of the biggest fallacies we have is the thought that the huge level of resources that the oil and gas brings to us as a nation is enough for us to get to where we're going. In reality, when you look at the oil and gas sector, where I come from, in terms of its contribution to our GDP, is less than 15%. So what we must do is, in our mind, to quickly convert the huge resources we're earning from oil and gas to diversify it into the key sectors that boost our GDP, notably agriculture and services. And to then do that to the sort of scale that changes the game for us and makes all these numbers to be fed by people on the street, means we must find a means and a method to fix our infrastructure deficit. Up until now, what we've had is government had been the one championing investment in the infrastructure space. The paradigm must shift from government funding it, because government access to resources is by far limited, to one that becomes a private sector-led solution, where it is not a case of you are building infrastructure and finding government funds to subsidize its sustenance. You are finding what we call a bankable structure that allows private sector to be able to invest and create a scheme where in its totality is an ecosystem that fits itself. So I talk about the critical infrastructure. Today we have oil reserves and gas reserves being explored in certain parts of the country. We lack the critical pipelines to evacuate them to the areas where they fuel the power plants or they feed the agro-based industries that can make the economy work. And our effort all along had been premised on government being able to find appropriation from the National Assembly process to do it. We will never be able to do it. The scale of what needs to fix this runs into several tens of billions of dollars. In the next 10 to 15 years, we cannot do it. So it has to be government putting in place an encouraging framework that allows those who have the capital and can ring-fence themselves, the supplier, the investor, and the off-taker, in such a way that those become viable projects. If I piggyback and cite as an example, in Lagos State where we are today, a number of the projects that Lagos State had executed are executed on the back of public-private partnerships, recognizing that there's only so much government could do, and all that government needs to do is to create the environment and allow people that are more efficient users of resources to find a means where they can do this in a way that the average person begins to feel the impact. Until we begin to do that, we would not see all these numbers translate to visible impact on the millions of Nigerians at the foot of the chain, as Tolu has said.
In other words, government policies will have to change to accommodate more private sector participation.
Correct.